Our new book today is called Dragon in the Driveway, Book 2 in the Dragon Keeper series. Chapter 1 is called An Ill Wind. Dear Mom and Dad, it's still raining. The local weather guy says it's a record. Not as bad as India that time the Jeep floated away, but bad. Our dog Emmy got tired of being cooped up in the garage. She got out and ran down the driveway into the street. Aunt Maggie went nuts. She made these poor guys come in the rain and put in an invisible fence. It's this underground wire that's supposed to keep the dog in the yard. One step over it and whammo, she gets really zapped. Don't tell Aunt Maggie, but Emmy runs right over it anyway. 10-year-old Jesse reread his email. He didn't include the information that the dog had turned into a dragon for an instant the first time she was zapped, and that Mrs. Nosy Britches, who lived across the street, was standing at her mailbox the exact moment that it happened. It's the oddest thing, Miss Nosy Britches kept saying to anyone that would listen, but I could swear that a very large lizard in that driveway across the street, if I didn't know better, I'd swear it was some sort of dragon. Jesse finished the email and hit send. He listened to the rain rattling on the roof and watched the slideshow on the screensaver. The pictures were of him and his parents in some places where they had traveled. Looking at it made him happy, if only a little homesick for his parents, and even places like India, Africa, Costa Rica. When he had first come to America to stay with his cousin Daisy, who was also 10, he had been so homesick that he had worn 2 wristwatches, one showing the time in the US and the other showing the time in Africa where his parents were. These days, he just wore the one watch showing American time. But there wasn't quite enough to keep him busy, like now. Then he missed his parents. Jesse was just shutting down the computer when he heard Daisy scream out his name. He leapt up, tore downstairs, slid down the hall in his socks, and collided with the kitchen table. "What?" he said, panting. "What is it, Daisy?" Daisy was standing on a footstool, gazing out the window over the sink. Her long white blonde hair was tucked behind her ears, which were pointy like an elf's, and bright pink with excitement. "Jesse, look," she said, tapping on the window. But the panes were fogging up with Daisy's breath. "What are we looking at?" he asked. "Don't you see? There. Jesse boosted himself onto the edge of the sink, leaned over, and rubbed a clear spot in the bottom pane. He stared through the porthole into the side yard. Trunks and leaves and branches were all churned up into one great green swarming sopping mess. "Oh boy," he said, mustering some appreciation for the view. "The wind sure is blowing hard." Daisy tugged impatiently at the hood of his sweatshirt. "The 2 trees, Jess. See them?" "Which 2 trees?" She groaned. "Get down and let me look." They switched places. Daisy pointed and said, "They're standing right there, 10 feet from the house, I swear. Jesse, those trees were not there before." Jesse shivered. "How can you tell?" he asked. "Simple. There isn't either a Douglas fir or a quaking aspen growing in our side yard," Daisy said, getting down from the sink. "Plus, they both have a bright strip of cloth or ribbon or something wrapped underneath their trunks. You can't miss them." Even though he had been living in Daisy's house for 6 months, Jesse did not know every tree in the yard. That was Daisy's saying. Her favorite saying was, "Not knowing the names of the flowers and the trees is like not knowing the names of your own brothers and sisters." Jesse craned his neck and gave the side yard another look. He couldn't see anything in place or any bright strips of cloth. He didn't want to make Daisy feel bad, but he didn't want to lie just to make her feel good. Sorry, Daisy, I just don't see what you're seeing. Daisy's face turned bright pink to match her ears. Before he could say another word, she ran out of the kitchen. He heard her stocking feet pounding up the stairs. Seconds later, she slammed her bedroom door so hard he flinched and drew the hood of his sweatshirt up. He took one last glance out the window, just as a gust of wind came up and bent the trees toward the house, wagging their branches at him like scolding fingers. Jesse sighed. I didn't say I didn't believe her, he explained to the trees as if they were members of a jury. I just said I didn't see it myself. Suddenly the wind would let up for a moment, and the trees straightened. They looked stern but satisfied. The storm is making us all wacky, Jesse thought. Cabin fever. That's what Aunt Maggie had called it in the morning before she left for work at the ad company. It did feel as though they were all trapped in a cabin of a ship that was riding out an endless storm. It had been raining for 5 days. How much longer could this go on? Jesse grabbed a container of coleslaw from the refrigerator and headed toward the mudroom. Keepers didn't get any time off, even in bad weather, and Emmy would be hungry for her mid-morning snack of something rich in calcium. He pulled on his yellow poncho, still damp from the morning when he had delivered Emmy her breakfast of leftover Brussels sprouts and au gratin with a side of delicious greens. Jesse pulled on the poncho hood and opened the back door. The rain hit him in the face. He stepped back into the shelter of the doorway and peered around. Leaves or broken branches lay everywhere in the backyard. The light shone in the rock shop, the garden shed Uncle Joe converted into a lab for his studies. Uncle Joe was hard at work on a project. Jesse took a deep breath and plunged off the back landing, down the steps and into the swirling wetness. The rain blinded him, so he followed his feet over leaf-strewn ground to the garage. He groped around in his pocket for a key that fit into the lock. Then he flung open the side door and kicked it shut, leaning against him to catch his breath. "Jesse!" said the dragon beside herself with joy. She bounded over, her long green tail smacking the concrete floor. "Jesse, Jesse, Jesse!" Emmy had been able to speak since she had hatched. The sound of her voice still gave Jesse a thrill. It was a kind of rich rippling like molten gold. Jesse raised his voice over the drumming of the loudly on the garage roof. "I brought you a snack." He showed her the coleslaw. Jemmy shook her head and pulled back. "No cabbage. Swill for me now, please, thank you." "Aunt Maggie says I have robin fever," she told him. Jesse laughed. "It's cabin fever, Em, and I'm still afraid I don't have a cure for it." "Going outside will make me all better," Emmy said coyly. "Now, please, thank you. You're welcome." She swirled gracefully in the blue-green spiral that drifted in a standstill. Although she had been no bigger than a kitten when she first hatched, now she was as big as a pony. There were 2 bumps on her shoulder blades, which Jesse thought might turn into wings. 2 dark ridges ran down Emmy's back and her long tail. A single horn sprouted from her head, which was shaped like a seahorse's, only broader. She still smelled faintly of chili peppers, although the scent was fading as fast as her baby talk. Emmy's eyes were large and sparkly and green as emeralds. She had been her eyes inspired Jesse to name her Emerald. Those eyes looked a little sad now and settled down with her tail curled around her like a big green cat and said, "Why is our daisy flower unhappy today?" Jesse shot Emmy a curious look. "How do you know she's unhappy?" "And since when is she Daisy Flower?" "Since I say so. She is Daisy Flower, just like you are Jesse Tiger." "Don't remind me," he groaned. Tiger was his middle name, but sometimes he would just as soon forget. "Why is she sad?" Emmy asked. Jessie shrugged. She saw something, and I didn't see it, and she got mad. Emmy cocked her head. Daisy has a cabin fever, too, she said. Daisy will go outside just like Emmy. Then our cabins will cool down. Jessie chuckled. Well, I'm not sure how much better you're going to feel playing in this storm, he told her. Not playing, said Emmy. She added with a sly spying. Spying? Jessie asked. Spying on Dragon Slayer, Emmy said with a knowing nod. That would be a switch. It was usually St. George who spied on them, wanting to find Emmy. Every day for 2 weeks he had parked his big black Cadillac outside their house, from 9 to 5 like it was his job. If Jessie and Daisy went out, he followed. Jessie nearly laughed thinking about it. St. George had hardly been stealthy about his spying. Then he had disappeared with the rain, as abruptly as the sunshine in the blue sky. Bad man has a plan, Emmy said. We will spy on him in his den. Then we will steal his big book. St. George's den was a lab at the zoology department at Goldmine City College, where he was posing as a herpetologist or reptile scientist. In the first week of Emmy's life, St. George had stolen Emmy from the cousins. The cousins had gone to his den and stolen her back. That was when they had seen the big book. It was as big as a door and thick as 5 phone books. The cover was too heavy to lift, and the gold writing cut into the dark red letter in a language neither of the cousin could have ever seen. Spying. Brilliant, said Jessie. That ought to cheer up Daisy. I'll tell her. You eat your cabbage, Swill. Emmy took the container in her agile forepaws. I will eat it all up for Jessie Tiger. Thank you, please. You're welcome, please, Emmy Dragon, said Jessie. Then he ran back to the house, as careful as always to lock the back door behind him. When he passed through the mudroom into the kitchen, he was surprised to find Daisy on the edge of the sink, her nose pressed against the window. They're gone, Jess, she said in a small, forlorn voice. The 2 trees with strips of cloth wrapped around their trunks. I said I saw. They're gone. Really? Said Jessie. From where he was standing, it all looked the same. Still, he was sorry that the trees had gone before he had gotten a chance to look for them again. Maybe they were never there in the first place, Daisy said sadly. She jumped down from the sink and hugged herself hard. Maybe this is one of those times when I want to believe in magic so bad I saw something that wasn't really there. Or maybe, Jessie said gently, the trees had to go someplace, and they'll be back later, when they're ready to show themselves to both of us. The corners of Daisy's lips turned up a fraction. You believe me? Hey, he said 2 months ago, if somebody told me we'd have a dragon living in our garage, I'd have told them they were wacky. Now, who knows what can happen, right? Daisy nodded, but she still seemed a little down, so Jessie told her about Emmy's plan. Daisy perked up. I'll tell my pops we're going to the college to see the documentary they're showing on climate change. Boy, is that ever appropriate, she said, cocking a thumb to the window. You turn off the invisible fence. We wouldn't want to give Miss Nosy Britches another flash of a dragon. Jess went down to the basement circuit breaker and flipped the switch that controlled the invisible fence. Then, still in his poncho, he returned to the garage. Emmy was just licking the coleslaw container with her pink forked tongue when Daisy burst through the door and slammed it behind her. She had a big scowl on her face. Pop says we can't go gallivanting, not till the rain stops. Jessie groaned, but Emmy asked eagerly, when the rain stops piddling down, then we can go out? That's what the rock doc said, Daisy replied, plopping down on an old picnic bench. Yeah, who knows when that'll be, Jessie added, plopping down next to her. I do, Emmy said, her irises beginning to spin. Like a set of brilliant green pinwheels, her nostrils gave off 3 puffs of peppery pinkish smoke, which rose up and radiated outward, filling the entire garage with a bright, hot, pulsing light. The next instant, the rain stopped drumming on the roof. And that's the end of the chapter. Chapter 2 is called The Tree Slayer.